اللهم صل على سيدنا. نحمده ونصلي على رسول النبي الكريم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الصلاة والسلام عليك يا سيد المرسلين، يا خاتم النبيين، يا شفيع المذنبين، يا أنيس الغاربين، يا رحمة للعالمين. صلى الله عليه وسلم. So inshallah, continuing with the topic, which is Ahlul Bayt. And in last week we mentioned some aspects of Hudaybiyah and other things, and we spoke, kind of shifted a little bit and talked about Imam Zayd bin Ali bin Hussein bin Ali, and alayhi salam, who so I won't go back into that. There are other aspects of him, but again, he was a very knowledgeable scholar and practical scholar. Unfortunately, you have a lot of people that have a lot of knowledge, but they don't apply it, and the knowledge is no good if you don't apply it. Otherwise, why did you gain the knowledge if you're not going to use it? Like these days, a lot of these people, they have this trivia knowledge. Useless.
I thought I had somebody not just going.
Yeah, so go check. Maybe not. It sounded like somebody knocked on the door.
That's what I thought.
No? Okay. It might have just kind of the door shifted a little bit, made the noise. But, again, knowledge for the sake of knowledge, is useless. That's why we ask for ilmul nafi', this useful knowledge. As we spoke about them, and then we kind of talked a little bit about Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And these are things that I'm going to keep coming back to. But I want to continue on as far as historically, and as far as since we've been trying to go more chronologically in order. So, basically after Sulh Hudaybiyah, so the treaty was an agreement that was supposed to last for 10 years. So it was a 10-year agreement. A lot of these treaties, they have expiration dates on them. So the treaty for Hudaybiyah, the expiration date was 10 years after the date of signing. And again, if you remember in the treaty, the Muslims, they had to leave Makkah that year, but they could come back the following year and make Umrah. And then anyone who was, the Muslims could not attack anyone that was aligned with Quraysh, and Quraysh would not attack anyone who was aligned with the Muslims. And no one would attack each other. However, anyone who escaped from the Muslims and went to the non-Muslims would be given asylum. But anyone who escaped from the non-Muslims and came to the Muslims would have to be handed back over. And so, as we said, in appearance, a lot of the terms of the treaty were against the Muslims. But when you look at the results of what happened from the treaty, they all favored the Muslims, to the extent that Quraysh actually in between came and had that clause of Muslims having to be handed back over to Quraysh who escaped from Quraysh. they had that clause taken out because it was working against them. So, because what would happen is that Muslims that would escape, instead of coming to Medina, would go someplace else and cause trouble for Quraysh. And then they would come to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and say, you tell them to stop. He said, why should I tell them to stop? They're not in my territory. So Quraysh themselves came and asked for that clause to be changed. Which it was, and then these people eventually came and joined Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Medina Munawwara. The interesting thing is that Quraysh didn't even last 2 years. The treaty was for 10 years, and 2 years later they violated.
Change their mind.
Well, no, they didn't change their minds. The thought process was, how will he know? So what happened is, there was a tribe that lived close to Mecca called Banu Khuza'ah. And these people were aligned with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Many of them were Muslim, but many of them were not. But even those that were not were loyal to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And even before Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they had all been loyal to his grandfather, Hazrat Abdul Muttalib. Okay. So some of them had come to Mecca, for business and also to make Umrah. And there was another clan, Banu Bakr. Banu Bakr was aligned with Quraysh. And you'll see how this ties into, and why this ties into Ahlul Bayt as we go forward. So Banu Bakr is aligned with Quraysh, and they have this bad blood with Banu Khuza'ah. Banu Bakr had this war going on before the treaty was signed. Once the treaty was signed, now they all had to stop. So Banu Bakr some of them were also in Makkah at the time, and when they see these people, they said, this is prime time for us to take revenge. We can kill these people. And again, how will Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam know? So they came to the leaders of Quraysh. So they didn't do this on their own. So they came to the leaders of Quraysh and they said, here's what we want to do.
No, who came to the leaders of Quraysh?
Banu Bakr. Banu Bakr came to the leaders of Quraysh
To kill Khuza'ah.
to kill those Khuza'ah that were there,
Yeah.
or at least attack them. And, if not kill them, then enslave them. So they come to the leaders of Quraysh and they say, this is what we want to do. And Quraysh says, well, we have this treaty. How can we do this? We can't allow you to do this, and we can't do this because of the treaty that we've signed. That'll be violation of the treaty. And they said, well, how will he know?
Banu Bakr.
Yeah, Banu Bakr says, how will he know? And Quraysh says, how will he know? We can do this and no one will know. And so they attack Banu Khuza'ah. And some of the leaders of Quraysh were also involved in this attack. So these leaders, they're involved in the attack. Now, Banu Khuza'ah, most of them that were there were Muslim. So they try to defend themselves, but they're overwhelmed. So they run to the Hatim, to the Kaaba, because whoever enters the sanctuary is in safety and security. And this was a law that was honored by all of the Arabs even before Islam, that whoever is in the sanctuary of the Haram, no one can attack him.
Protected. He's protected.
He's protected. He is protected.
Even in the Jahiliyyah.
Even in the days of Jahiliyyah, they honored this law. Okay. Of course, when the Muslims come, all the laws change. For the Muslims, all the laws change. So when they run into, to the Hatim close to the Kaaba, they're expecting that this attack is going to stop, but the attack doesn't stop. And what some of them did was they put hoods on their faces so Allah can't see them. Okay. And they continue attacking.
And this was at night?
This is at night.
Yeah.
So this is in the darkness of night because again, they don't want anybody knowing that they're doing this because they don't want word to get to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that this has happened. And the goal is let's just finish them off. No one will know. We'll clean up after ourselves and we'll be done with. Okay. So when Banu Khaza enter the Hatim, Quraysh and Banu Bakr, those that were attacking, don't stop. And some of them, as I said, they put the hoods on so Allah won't know who it is. And keep attacking. And so now when they see that these people, they don't, their attack has not stopped, they call out. They say, Aghithni ya Rasulullah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Help us, O Rasulullah, O the Messenger of Allah, help us, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam at that time is in the house of Bibi Maymuna.
In Medina.
In Medina Munawwara. In the house of his wife Bibi Maymuna radiallahu anha. And he is making wudu for tahajjud. Yes. So it's the middle of the night. So he's making wudu for the tahajjud. And at that moment he responds and he says, Labbaik. Labbaik. And the people here in Mecca hear his voice. Those who are being attacked hear his voice. And Banu Bakr and the leaders of Quraysh that have joined them hear his voice. And when they hear his voice, they think, oh, an army has come, and they run away. And Banu Khaza, those who had not been killed by that point, are now safe. The wife of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the mother of the believers, Bibi Maymuna radiallahu anha, she asked Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Ya Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I've never seen you do this before. Why did you do this? You're making wudu. Why are you saying labbaik? Which means here I am. So he tells her what has happened in Makkah, and that he responded so that the attackers would disperse, which is what happens. And he immediately starts making preparations to go and deal with Quraysh because they violated the treaty. And not just in a minor way. They took blood. There are those who don't believe in this aspect of what I just said. The problem with that is, they talk of, when you read other aspects of the history. So Banu Khaza, they sent a messenger immediately to tell Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam what has happened. When he reaches Medina, and he's Medina Munawwara, and he says to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam what has happened, and Rasulullah says, that you will be aided, but he's already started the preparations. So if he didn't know, then how has he already started the preparations? Okay. And then a delegation from Banu Khaza comes, and they address him, and they say, Adrikni ya Rasulullah, help us, O Rasulullah. And Rasulullah says, you will be helped. Again, preparations had already been started. So, Abu Sufyan, of course, so Abu Sufyan, who is the leader of Quraysh, he now is, trying to figure out, what do I do?
He was a Muslim then.
Yeah, he's not Muslim right now. He won't become Muslim until shortly afterwards. So he's not Muslim, so he says, what do I do? I gotta do something. Otherwise, we violated the treaty, and not a minor violation, a major violation of the treaty, and Rasulullah ﷺ is gonna come. And if he comes, there's no way we can stop him. Because, as I said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said about the treaty, even though all of the terms seem to be against the Muslims, but he said about the treaty, Inna fatahna laka fatham mubina. That verily, because of you, for your sake, we have given them a manifest victory. If you remember when he went to Hudaybiyah, and signed the treaty, he had with him how many people? 1,400 Muslims, right? Now when he's going to come back, he's going to come back with 10,000 Muslims. Because of the terms of the treaty, all of this propaganda had kind of gone to the side. They couldn't push the propaganda like they were before. You still had it a little bit, but not like it was before. So now you had people accepting Islam because they could actually see the reality. Yeah. So Abu Sufyan, he takes off for Medina. And when he arrives, the first thing that he does is he goes to the house of his daughter, Bibi Habiba, radiallahu anha, who is the mother of the believers, the wife of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now here I want to kind of point out a certain thing because I've heard, and of course, people say stupid stuff. I've heard people say, oh, see, there are 3 companions who gave their daughters to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in marriage. Abu Bakr, radiallahu anhu, the father of Aisha Siddiqa, radiallahu anhu. Umar, radiallahu anhu, the father of Bibi Hafsa, radiallahu anhu. And they say Abu Sufyan. The catch there is that, Abu Bakr and Umar, yes, and they wanted their daughters to be married to Rasulullah, so this was an honor for them. Abu Sufyan was still mushrik. He didn't want his daughter to marry Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the story behind this is that she accepted Islam very early on with her husband Ubaydullah ibn Jahsh. Ubaydullah ibn Jahsh, his history is that, before Islam, at one point he became a Jew, another point he became something else, and then he just kind of jumped from religion to religion. When Islam came, he jumped onto Islam. Okay, he was he was from a fairly well-to-do household, so he's one of those who immigrated to Abyssinia with his wife Habiba, who is the daughter of Abu Sufyan. When he arrives in Abyssinia, Abyssinia was a Christian country. So, of course, he
Abyssinia is Egypt now, man.
No, Abyssinia is where Ethiopia and Somalia, right in that area. So it's in that area. So Abyssinia basically, Ethiopia, Somalia, Kenya, parts of that were part of this empire. So this is where the Muslims were first sent to immigrate. Rasulullah, so first 50 year of the mission, he sends people because they're being persecuted, so he sends them to Abyssinia because of Najashi, who is a very honorable king and a just king.
Christian king.
He is Christian king, then eventually he becomes Muslim. But the majority of people there are still Christian. Ubaydullah ibn Jahsh, while he's there, he says, I like this, so he becomes Christian. So he becomes Christian, and his wife, of course, when he becomes Christian, she leaves him because she's still Muslim. And then eventually Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam sends her request for marriage. So he proposes to her. She accepts, and Najashi is the one who actually fulfilled the meher. Of course, he's become Muslim by this point of the marriage. So then later on, she eventually comes and joins Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Because initially this, of course, was a long-distance marriage, but then she comes and joins Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Medina Munawwara. So Abu Sufyan, being her father, figures that, this is my way in. I'll get her to intercede on my behalf. And he comes acting like nothing's happened. I just want to extend the terms of the agreement. This is such a good agreement, I want to extend the terms of the agreement. I want to make this, I don't want to end this, I don't want this to end in 10 years, I want this to go on. And that's his storyline. So he comes to her, and when he enters the house, he knocks, she opens the door, is her father. She allows him in. He starts to sit down, and as soon as he starts to sit down, she removes the bedding that he was about to sit on. And he, of course, is shocked, and she says to his daughter, he says, you know, did you remove it because you thought that it wasn't good enough for me? Or did you remove it because you thought I wasn't good enough for it? And she says that this is the bedding of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and you are najis, you are impure. You know, you're a mushrik, you are impure, and I don't want you sitting on it. So all his hopes about getting her to intercede on his behalf just kind of went away. He realizes this isn't going to work out. So eventually, you know, and he says to his daughter, he says, you know, you've changed since you've left me. And he leaves. So now he's thinking, okay, who do I go to? Who can I get to enter? So he goes to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He says, you know, I've come with no other purpose except to extend our agreement. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, are you sure that's all you've come for? You know, this is all you've come for. This is why you've come. He says, yes. And then eventually Rasulullah ignores him, so he says, okay, I'm not getting anywhere with this. So he goes to Abu Bakr, radiallahu anhu, who tells him, you know, if Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam decides something, who are we to go against it? So he goes to Umar, and Umar radiallahu anhu says, look, you know, if I had nothing to fight you with except dust, I would fight you with the dust. You know, Umar puts things in his own words. Right. So then he goes to some other companions who he thought maybe they'll intercede. Same response, you know. So eventually he comes to Ali. So he comes to Ali, the house of Ali, knocks on the door, gains permission to come in, and he asks him to intercede. You know, we've got such a good agreement, so we want to do, you know, I want to extend it. Ali says, you know, look, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam decides something, who are we to go against it? You know. So then he turns to Fatima, salamullahi alayha. Same thing, you know, I've only come with good intentions, like they always do. I've come with good intentions. You know, everyone knows my heart is pure. You know, like they talk. You know, I love, you know, this. So please. And she, same thing, and then she ignores it. And then he says, because Imam Hassan alayhi salam, who at this time is 5 years old, he's there, and he says, you know, have this child declare that there is peace between Quraysh and the Muslims, and he will be the greatest man in Arabia forever. And she says to him, he's a child, he has nothing to do with this. So he turns to Ali again. He says, what do you suggest? He says, look, you know, if you want to save face with your people, you have only one way. You can go, you're the leader of a big clan, you can go and make a declaration. Not that it means anything, but you can go and make a declaration. So that's what he does. He goes out and he says, I declare that there is peace and protection between the Muslims and Quraysh. And then he comes to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He says that I have declared this peace and I expect it to be honored. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says to him, he says, those are your words. You know, again, you're coming to us after you've already violated it. Killed the Muslims. You violated the treaty, you know, by spilling the blood of the Muslims, and now you want this. Yeah. So he goes back. You know, and Quraysh, of course, you know, they're asking him how did it go, and he says, it didn't go too well. Because he knows that they've shot themselves in the foot. Yeah. And this really was kind of the expectation that, yeah, they're not going to be able to uphold even the smallest terms of this agreement. You know, even the ones that were in their favor, apparently, are the ones they came and asked to have removed because it was working against them. So that's, you know, and this is Allah's plan. So he also knows, because when he came to Ali, he says, you are the closest to me in relation to all of these people, because they were connected to Abu Manaf. You know, So if you look at the lineage of Rasulullah and the lineage of Ali, it's pretty much the same. Because both of their grandfathers, Ali bin Abi Talib bin Abdul Muttalib bin Hashim bin Hashim bin Abd Manaf. So this is where they meet. And so now, again, you'll see how this ties into Ahlul Bayt. Of course, he knew where to come. You go to somebody close. So he came to the household eventually. And, of course, didn't get the response he wanted. He leaves. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has made the arrangements. And now with 10,000 men, he marches toward Makkah Mukarramah. I'm not going to go into the details. He gave the names of 10 people. And he said that even if you find them holding on to the kiswa, the cloak of the Kaaba, they are to be killed. And amongst these was Abdullah ibn Sa'd bin Abi Sarh. Okay, so this is a name to remember. Abdullah ibn Sa'd bin Abi Sarh, because he will create issues down the road. He will not be killed then. But I throw this out just to kind of throw it out so people can start. So when you hear the name again, maybe something will, a bell might ring. We know, okay, he marches on Makkah. Makkah surrenders. Abu Sufyan accepts Islam. Right before the army enters the city. So Abu Sufyan becomes radiyallahu anhu. And everyone is given protection. So as Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, he says that today, anyone who seeks protection in the house of Abu Sufyan is safe. Anyone who seeks protection anywhere, he names specific enemies' houses, he is safe. He is safe. He is safe. And he said that, I say unto you what Yusuf al-Islam said to his brethren, that today there is no that everyone is in protection and there'll be no revenge or retaliation taken from anybody. So basically everyone is forgiven. Again, these are the same people who were constantly trying to kill him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They had killed, scores and hundreds of those that he loves. And yet he forgives them. So now, of course, comes the task of cleaning everything up. Because Makkah, before Islam, if you remember, idols everywhere, all of this indecency everywhere, all of these things. And so, so you have around the Kaaba, and within the Kaaba, you have 360 idols. Their form of idol worship was very similar to the form of idol worship of a lot of other places, okay, even modern day. So it wasn't like one homogeneous ideology. Every clan had their own idol. This is our main idol, this is our main idol, this is our main idol. So all of these Arab tribes and clans had these various idols, and they all put one of their idols around the Kaaba so that when they would come, they could worship their idol. So 360, which is one idol for every day. So Abu Bakr and Umar radiallahu were placed in charge of the task of cleaning the idols up outside of the Kaaba. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he entered, he went to them and he said, وَجَعَ الْحَقْ وَذَهَقَ الْبَاطِلِ, that the truth has come and falsehood has dispersed. And he would say this, pointing to the idol, and every time he would say it, an idol would fall. Whichever idol he pointed to, it would fall. And so Abu Bakr and Umar were placed in charge of cleaning up all of the idols on the outside. But then you had idols inside. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam enters the Kaaba, but he doesn't enter it by himself. He takes with him Sayyidina Ali karamallahu wajh. And so they're cleaning up inside. And we'll get to the ramifications of this in a minute. But then you have idols on, like in the crevices high up where you can't normally just reach. So he tells Ali radiallahu anhu to get on his shoulders. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, he says to Rasulullah, to lower your shoulders. So about humility. It's talking about humility. A metaphorical term. But he does this literally for Sayyidina Ali karamallahu wajh. Because when he says to Ali, get on my shoulders, Ali says, Ya Rasulullah. So how can I get on your shoulders? And then when he insists, and Ali then realizes he has no choice, so then he gets on the shoulders of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and takes down the idols from above. And he says, Ali radiallahu anhu says that if I had wanted to at that moment, I could have touched the stars. Because when he got on his shoulders, he was truly in a different realm. And so he says, I could have touched the stars. So several aspects of this that we need to kind of focus on. One is that, inside the Kaaba he took Ali. Outside he left everybody else. Abu Bakr and Umar in charge, and then they were directing all of the cleaning. Inside he himself goes along with Ali. So you can look at the Kaaba like the heart within you, within us. And if we want to clean the inside, the ones that will come and clean that inside are Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Sayyidina Ali karamallahu wajh. Ali is the distributor of wilayah, the friendship of Allah. There is no wali except through Ali. And it doesn't matter who it is. From the previous nations or this nation. And it doesn't matter what their status is, or anything else. With the exception of the prophets, every wali, because every prophet is also a wali, but every wali, excluding the prophets, were made wali by Ali. And so this is part of what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is teaching us, that if we want our insides cleaned, our heart to be clean from the inside, then we need to let the love of Ali enter our hearts. Because that love will then clean that heart. And the love of Ali includes loving those that he loves. So his household, and also the companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because we see his love, the love between them, which we've been talking about before. And we'll talk about onwards as well, and focus on that aspect, different parts of that aspect later on. But again, we will see this love, especially when we start talking about Ahlul Bayt and their contribution during the Khilafah. It's funny and sad. There's this one so-called scholar, speaker, and he, this wasn't Ali bin Abi Talib, this was some other Ali, this was Ali bin al-As, who was the son of Bibi Zainab, the daughter of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the oldest daughter of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It was him. He was a young boy, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam picked him up, and he had him take those down. And he made this huge speech on this. And there's so many different references and all this, and all the references are wrong. And there are not so many different references. There's like maybe one or two references. But what's really more funny about it is that this guy made this huge speech in front of all these people, and then later on he's called out for it. And then eventually he recants that, but his recanting it is, kind of in private. Well, you're going to say it in public, then recant it in public. And recant it with the same vigor that you said, or more, than what you said before. But no, that's not how it works, unfortunately. And this is why in Islam, if someone says something publicly that's wrong, you need to correct them publicly. This stuff of, I'm going to use hikmah, I'm going to go to him privately and talk to him privately. That doesn't work if it's being done publicly. The hikmah at that time is to correct him publicly. Same way like when the imam is leading salat, if he makes a mistake, you don't go to him afterwards and say, oh, you made a mistake. You correct him then, because he's in that position. He's accepted that position, so he has to accept the responsibilities of that position. This is also why when Umar radiallahu was the Khalifa, all of his governors and generals and everybody in any position had to come for Hajj every year. And it wasn't they were going to Hajj, oh, I'm going to Hajj, happy about it. They were saying, oh gosh, we got to go to Hajj, because they knew what was coming. Because he would put them up and publicly ask any grievances against them. And the people would publicly, say something, and Umar, rather, if he found in favor of the person making the argument against one of his appointees, he would publicly humiliate them. Because you are a public servant. So anyway, so that's kind of a side point there. So again here, if we want to be wali, we have to have the love of Ali. I mean, it's that simple. So this is one indication here that if we want all these idols cleaned out of our heart, we have to let the love of Ali come into our heart so that it will get cleaned out. The other thing here is, to be the ride of Rasulullah is one thing, and that's a great thing. But to ride Rasulullah, for Rasulullah to be your ride, that's a very different thing. Just like when he had Imam Hussein al-Islam on his shoulders, and Umar, he says, Ya Rasulullah, what a beautiful ride. And Rasulullah says, what a beautiful rider. So again, Ali, he said at that moment, if he wanted to, he could touch the stars. For the true faqir, for the true one who's gained this knowledge, the knowledge of the true faqir isn't simply knowing. It's not ilmul yaqeen. It's aynul yaqeen. It's the truth. It's seeing. So they don't say anything unless they've seen it. And Ali, in this moment, is saying that he could touch the stars, and he literally could have touched the stars if he wanted to. And we know this also because in the Battle of Nahwan, as he's going for the Battle of Nahwan, so this will be during his Khilafah. So he had three major battles that are well known: Jamal, Siffin, and Nahwan. So Nahwan was against the Khawarij. I won't get into the details of the battle itself, but the point that I want to make is that on the way to the battle, he's passing by this temple. And the priest, or the leader of the temple, is an astronomer, an astrologer. And this is at a time when astrology and astronomy were pretty much the same thing, unanimous. And this guy is a priest of this subject. He uses this to tell the people. So in today's terms, you can think of him as like a PhD in astrology or astronomy. So he knows the names of the stars, all the names of the stars that they knew at the time. He liked Ali. radiallahu anhu. So he comes to Ali radiallahu anhu, he says that please don't go for this battle, because the stars of the believer, the star of the believers, of the Muslims is not out right now. And so I'm afraid that you won't win. So Ali radiallahu anhu, he asked him, he says, do you know about the stars? And he said, yes, of course, you know, I mean, this is his field. He said, yes. So he starts asking him questions about the stars. And he says, what about the movement of this star? How does it move? Never heard of that star. So he takes it and, well, what about this star? What does it do when it does this movement? I've never heard of that star. So he names a few stars, and stars he'd never heard of, because their light still hasn't come to the earth. No one had ever seen those stars. But Ali had seen those stars. When he's on the shoulders of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So eventually he says, well, you know, fine, you don't know about the stars. Let me ask you about the earth. So he starts asking about the movement of the earth, you know, and all of these things. And he can't answer any of the questions. So then he says to him, he says, look, I don't do anything without the approval and the command of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the hadiths are very clear on this. In Sahih Muslim, Bukhari, you can find them. He says, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has already told me that not even 10 of my men will be martyred, and not even 10 of their men will survive. And this is exactly what happens in the Battle of Nahwan. Okay. That's a battle that we're going to talk about later on, but I just wanted to emphasize this aspect of that, because it's connected to him making this statement that if he wanted to, he could touch the stars. And this also gets to the question, we've talked about this before. I don't think in the class, but in general, we've talked about this. You know, Ali is the door to the city of knowledge. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the city of knowledge, and Ali is that door. So if you want to go through to attain any of that knowledge, you got to go through that door. Okay. So just to give people a glimpse of that knowledge, Ali was once asked, for the picture sit down. So Ali radiallahu anhu is asked by a Bedouin. So he's asked by a Bedouin, how far is that from this? You know, the Bedouin's pointing toward the sun. And he asks him, he says, how far is that from this? You know, you have to understand, you know, he could have simply given some figure, right? Like today, if somebody asks me how far is the sun from the earth, I tell them what, 93 million miles. All right? But if you know, a child asks me that same question, who doesn't know what a mile is, then how do I tell him? Here you have a Bedouin asking a question, and the average Arab Bedouin at that time didn't know any number above 1,000. You know, and there are many stories about this. You know, they did. You know, 1,000 was their limit. Okay, that was it. So, you know, I can think I'm a great teacher, but if I can't communicate with my students, then what good is my teaching? Right? A good teacher is the one who can explain things at the level of the student. So again, you have this Bedouin who doesn't know any number more than 1,000, has no concept of miles or kilometers or any such distance, asking the question, how far is the sun from the earth? So Babul Madinatul Ilm, the door to the city of knowledge, gives him an answer. And he says, if a rider on an Arabian horse rode for 500 years, then he would reach the sun. So now let's break that down. If you look at the Arabian horse, it's interesting. You look at several hundred types of horses. The Arabian horse, even though it's a small horse, relatively speaking, it's the third fastest horse.
Kind of slim.
They're sleek, yes. They're sleek and they can go. Okay. And they're loyal. So it's the third fastest horse as far as types of horses. Quarter horse and thoroughbreds are faster. Okay. Average gallop speed of an Arabian horse is between 20 and 24 miles an hour. So if I take 22 miles an hour as the average speed, and now I multiply that by 24. Okay, so I get the distance in a day. I multiply that by 29 and a half, because in a month you have 29 and a half or 30 days, 29 or 30 days. I get how far the horse travels in a month, right? I multiply that by 12, and I get how far the horse travels in a year. And if you do that multiplication, it comes out to about 186,000 something miles, which is the speed of light in 1 second. So in 1 year, that rider has gone the distance that light would travel in 1 second. Okay. But then I multiply that by 500, and I get 93.6 million miles. Okay. The sun's, the Earth's,
Orbit.
Yeah, the Earth's orbit isn't circular; it's orbital. So there are times when it's closer.
Elliptical.
Yeah, elliptical. Yeah, it's not circular, it's elliptical. So there are times when it's closer and there are times when it's farther, right? So the furthest distance you have from the sun is somewhere about 95 million miles. And the closest distance is 91 point something million miles. But the average is 93. So if I take the calculations, the way Ali Radha explains it to this Bedouin, who again doesn't know any number more than 1,000, has no concept of distance as far as miles or kilometers, but he knows the horse, he knows the Arabian horse, and he knows the number 500. So he said 500 years, Arabian horse, and it gives you the distance. So this is, this is that knowledge that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has granted Ali, because it was his connection to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So again, coming back to what we were mentioning, when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam picked him up on his shoulders to take these things, again he said, if I wanted to, I could touch the stars, and literally he could have done that. And he's seeing all of this because now he's in this different realm. So this is, again, I guess, like I said, we're trying to go chronologically for the most part, and we do go ahead a bit and go back, behind and kind of tie things together. But, again, Ahlul Bayt, that household, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he took them under his cloak, what did he say? He said, Allahumma ha'ulahi ahli. That, oh Allah, these are my family. And who did he take under the cloak? Other than those 4 and himself. So 5 under the cloak. And the hadith, again, there's so many people who, oh no, this hadith is weak and that is weak and this and that. These are hadiths that are in Sahih Bukhari and Muslim. But again, because they're about this household, people want to undermine those as well. Like say, oh, it wasn't that Ali, it was some other Ali. And you get all of this nonsense. When we look at the household, we look at Bibi Fatima salamullah alayha. Hadith in Abu Dawud, Hadith in Tirmizi, and Bukhari's Adab al-Mufrad. That whenever Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would go and visit his daughter, be Fatima Salamullah alayha. She would stand up for him. And the hadiths are saying, she would stand up for him, and he would kiss her on the forehead, on her hands and her forehead, and she would kiss him on the hands, and then they would sit down. Whenever she entered his house, he would stand up for her, kiss her on her hands and her forehead, and then have her sit in his place. I mean, that's not a small thing. He would have her sit in his place. Sayyidina Ali karamallahu wajh, multiple occasions, when he takes off, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam takes off his own turban and places it on the head of Sayyidina Ali karamallahu wajh. And this wasn't, of course these days, because no one has really any concept of any honor or dignity anymore, so we have no concept of what this means. This is a transference of authority.
Like a crown king? Crown king?
Yes, like a king putting his crown on someone else's head. It's a transference of authority, that you accept him as authority. Like during the Khilafah of Uthman, when they had blockaded his house in the last days, they had blockaded his house, and all of this is going on. So Uthman sent word to Ali asking him for advice. Ali took off his turban and gave it to the man that gave it and said, "Give it to him." And what that meant was simply, give me an order and I will wipe this place clean. And Uthman said, no, I can't give you this order. But again, this is authority. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam on multiple occasions, taking his turban, sallallahu alaihi wasallam's turban, off and placing it on the head of Sayyidina Ali karamallahu wajh. And he didn't do that for anyone else. Just like with Bibi Fatima salamullah alayha, having her sit in his place. Because we have no concept of love, we have no concept of anything anymore, unfortunately. Because in a narcissistic world, everything is me, 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 me. So we cannot, we talk about these things, but for most of us, it's very hard for us to understand what this means and what it meant to them. After Fatih Makkah, of course now, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he came with 10,000 men. Everything's cleaned up. Then they have the Battle of Hunain. And again, another moment when, similar to Uhud, when all of those that were around Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam disperse because of the confusion and the attacks. But you always have one who's there, which is Sayyidina Ali karamallahu wajh. But now we come to, I'm going to kind of skip over Hunain right now, kind of jump a little forward. We've got a few minutes. I'm just going to mention one thing that we'll talk more about next week, inshallah. Tabuk. Okay, so after Fatih Makkah, of course, all of Arabia now concedes, and they start sending delegations to come and accept Islam, and if they don't accept Islam, at least acknowledge the authority of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this, of course, you have eyebrows being raised, on international fronts. So all of those empires that didn't care about Arabia at all, because the Arabs were, who are they? What are they going to do to us? Now it's like, oh, something's going on. This is a threat for us. So Caesar, Heraclius, the leader of the Romans, he realizes this, even though he honored the letter of Rasulullah when he sent him the letter. But power is power, and people don't like losing power. And so he figures, okay, we need to get an army and deal with this. So he starts to organize an army. And the word is that he will amass an army of 100,000 men. And so this is when Rasulullah starts making arrangements to go. And as I said, I'm going to kind of go over some other details of this next week, inshallah. But the point I want to make right now, or rather mention, not the point that I want to make, just mention this point. This was one of the two times that Rasulullah told the companions where they were going. Otherwise, he wouldn't tell them until they had already left. So they knew, and they were making preparations. And it was summer, it was August, hot, it was time for the dates to ripen, which meant that if they left, all of these dates that would ripen would go bad by the time they would be back. Okay. So, of course, all of the believers are going, but the hypocrites are finding excuses to stay behind. But Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he would always, whenever he would leave, would appoint somebody in charge in Medina Munawwara. Of course, when you go into a battle, and especially if you go into a battle against a superpower of the time, you want your best generals to be with you. So you would normally think that you would want Fatih Khaybar, the conqueror of Khaybar, with him. But this also tells us that he knows. And again, I'm going to go into this next week, inshallah. Unless there's a specific question about it later. So the one that he leaves behind in charge is Sayyidina Ali, karamallahu wajh. And so when he does this, Ali, he asks him, he says, Ya Rasulullah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you are leaving me behind with the women and children? But of course, he needed somebody strong to be left behind so the hypocrites would not do something. Because this would be prime time, because most of them were staying behind. This whole army was leaving. The city would be pretty much empty of most of the honorable, true believing men. And so you need somebody strong to be left behind. So he says, Ya Rasulullah, so you're leaving me behind with the women and the children? And this is when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he makes the statement, and again it's in Sahih Muslim and Bukhari and all of these major books. So this isn't simply something from the books of Sirah. This is from the books of the Hadith, where he says that I fear what the hypocrites may do. But then he says to Ali, he says, is it not enough for you that you are to me like Harun was to Musa alayhi salam? Now the Shia, they try to use this to say, oh, see, he should have been, the Khalifa after the first Khalifa after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Many issues with them using this statement, because if you look at the relationship between Harun and Musa alayhi salam, Harun alayhi salam passed away shortly before Musa alayhi salam passed away. So he wasn't left behind as his, heir in authority. Not in that sense. But whenever Musa alayhi salam would go anywhere, he would leave Harun alayhi salam in charge of Bani Israel. And the most famous example is when he left to Jabal Tur, when he left to Tur Sinin. For those days, who did he leave in charge? Harun alayhi salam. So, from an authority standpoint, Sayyidina Ali karamallahu wajh is to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam as Harun alayhi salam was to Musa alayhi salam. That he could speak on his behalf, conduct issues, take care of issues on his behalf. And this is what he's referring to. He says, is it not enough for you that you are to me as Harun was to to Musa alayhi salam. And we'll go into some more details about Tabuk next week, unless, like I said, unless we have any specific questions today. But we'll see, inshallah. I'll cover that and then some other aspects, and then eventually the role of Ahlul Bayt within the Khilafah, inshallah. Questions?
No, I thought you were gonna keep going. I guess besides Carabella, is there like any major battles that we should know about? I mean, I know we should know about a lot of them, but something major like that.
So the major ones that you should know about are Badr, which was the first battle, Uhud, the second battle, Khandaq, which is the third major battle. Then, well, let me make a list of the ones that would be good to know about, right? Because they're all connected anyway. So Badr, Uhud, Khandaq. Okay, so these battles are against, are I guess what you'd call defensive battles. So in these battles, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam allowed the disbelievers to come and attack against, so because Badr, of course, Quraysh comes, again, Uhud, Quraysh comes, Khandaq, you have a coalition of all of the clans and the Jews in Arabia coming against the Muslims in Medina Munawwara. Then you have Fatih Makkah, and immediately after Fatih Makkah, the conquest of Makkah, and immediately after that you have the Battle of Hunayn, which was basically all of those tribes that lived around Makkah that got together and said, oh, we need to put up a last stand, otherwise if we don't stop him now, there's no way to stop him. Okay. Tabuk is important, and Surah Tawbah, which is Surah number 9, deals a lot with Tabuk. And Tabuk is against Heraclius. It's a battle that never took place, okay, because the Muslims went, Heraclius never showed up. They waited there for a month, he never showed up, and then they made their way back. But there are a lot of rulings in Surah Tawbah, because it's the only surah in which we don't say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim in the beginning, Surah number 9. Because it deals with a lot of the issues of the hypocrites and the non-Muslims. Okay. After that, so after Tabuk, you really don't have any major battles during the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But then right afterwards, when Abu Bakr radhiyallahu becomes the Khalifa, you have the first 6 months was nothing but battles of his Khilafah, which is the Ridha Wars, because all of these, basically everyone other than the people of Makkah, Medina, and Taif, all of them apostated. All of them became non-Muslims and started attacking, or planning to attack Medina. Okay. And for various reasons. Some didn't want to give zakat, others were, this other guy declared himself as prophet, this other woman declared herself as prophetess. All of this was going on. Okay. So those are important to understand. And amongst those, the most important one is the Battle of Yamama. And we've talked about that quite a bit. So that was against Musaylima. And this is when Abu Bakr, when he gave the Shair, the code word for the battle, because they said that we're going to fight an enemy who looks like us, speaks like us, dresses like us, makes adhan like us, and makes iqama like us, because Musaylima did not change the adhan or the iqama. You still had Ashhadu anna Muhammadur Rasulullah in the iqama and in the adhan. He simply said that he's a prophet of Hijaz, I'm the prophet of Najd. He has sanctioned my prophethood, just like the Qadiani say today. So exactly the same thing. And so when they asked him this question, this is when he says that the Shair, or the code word for this battle, will be Ya Muhammada sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And which is also interesting, because if you look at it grammatically, like Qasim, the total term would be qasimu, pesh or damma at the end. Okay, but I'm stopping. I say qasim. Okay, so if I call him, I say ya qasimu.
Does that make it different?
Yes. Okay, but here they don't say ya Muhammadu sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's not simply calling. This is ya Muhammada sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is what you call nida. Nida is, like a heartfelt call. Like a child calling his mother. And so this is the difference here. And so this is the ruling of Abu Bakr at that time, which was followed by 13,000 companions that were in that army. And and the battle took place in Yamama, which is basically the northern part of modern-day Riyadh. So Yamama is important to note. There were many battles during the time of Umar. You have like 50 different battles against Iraq, against the Persians. You have number of different battles against the Byzantines, the Romans. They all have names. Don't expect anybody to remember all those names, but the concept should be there that the Muslims, because of their love for Allah and His Messenger ﷺ, overwhelmed all of these. And it's very interesting when you look at the history of Khalid bin Walid as he led. And there's actually a YouTube video. It's a non-Muslim guy. He's a historian. He's actually a political science guy who talks about Khalid bin Walid. He's out in Texas. I'll find the video and send it to you. He talks about this, and with the exception of one part of it, or one statement in there, it's very good. And he talks about it better than many Muslims could talk about it, which is sad to say. But and he's just in awe of Khalid, radiallahu anhu. And then you have many battles during the time of Uthman. None of them, again, you just need to have the concept of the expansion of the Muslim empire. But then when we come to the Khilafah of Sayyidina Ali, karramallahu wajh, if you look at Abu Bakr, Umar, and Uthman, radiallahu anhu, with the exception of the very end of the Khilafah of Uthman, all of these battles were against non-Muslims, or people that had either denounced Islam or never claimed to be Muslim. All of them. Okay. Or had done something that openly negated their Islam, like refusing to give zakat, saying, oh no, we don't want to give zakat. It's one thing someone doesn't give zakat. He is a sinner, but if he acknowledges that yes, he should be giving zakat, but he's not giving zakat, and he acknowledges that it's a sin, he's still Muslim. He's just a major sinner. Okay. It's something totally different when you say, oh, we don't want to give zakat.
There's no need for it.
There's no need for zakat. All right. Yeah, you just left Islam. Okay. So, but when you get to the Khilafah of Ali, you have not a single battle against anybody that didn't claim to be Muslim. And the three major battles, and that are during his time, there were many others, but the three major ones are Jamal, the Battle of the Camels, Siffin, and then Nahwan. Nahwan was the one that's against the Khawarij, those who basically exited Islam, but still their claim was that Ali was kafir, was disbeliever, or at least part of their claim was. When we get into the Khilafah, like if you read about Badr, if you read about Uhud, and all these other battles, you should always be reading this in under the shade of a sheikh who can guide you. Okay, because you have a lot of people, and I've met a lot of people who they started reading Islamic history and they actually left Islam because they have no concept of what they're reading about. And especially when you get into the Khilafah of Sayyidina Ali, radiallahu anhu, if you don't have someone guiding you who understands the basic concepts of the adab, the respect and the honor of the companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the honor and the status and the azmat of the household of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If you don't have those understandings and you start reading this, yeah, you will some way or the other end up out of Islam. So that's why, you know, when you read about that, it's very, very important to have somebody guiding you through it, so that you understand what's going on, why it's going on, why was this allowed to happen, and how is this connected to the Quran. Because like I was reading, you know, the other day, you know, stuff pops up, and this pop-up of, you know, that, oh, you know, Karbala is not mentioned in the Quran. Well, it depends on how you read the Quran. You know, there's nothing that is not mentioned in the Quran. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that in the Quran. He says there's nothing dry or wet that He has not mentioned in this book. So Karbala is mentioned in the Quran, but you have to understand, you know, what verses are referring to it and how they're referring to it. And if you don't understand that, and then yeah, you just, you know, you're reading the Quran like the Christians read the Bible, like a history book. And that's not what it is. And so, you know, we'll be talking more, and we've talked, you know, you've been here for a lot of the talks on Karbala anyway, and we'll be talking more, and it's a topic that never ends, you know, and like, you know, we keep talking about, all of Islam is contained in Karbala. So, I mean, it's so vast, and so many different perspectives, and so many different aspects of it, you know. I mean, we could talk about it forever and never really, you know, get very far. Yeah, so, and you know that, you know, you've been here long enough, alhamdulillah, and listening long, you know, listening consistently, alhamdulillah. You know, one of the few listening consistently, alhamdulillah, that you understand that point. But yeah, so you know, again, you know, even if you start reading the history, you've got to have some guidance.
Even the Quran.
Even the Quran. Yeah, even the Quran. Yeah, even the Quran, you know, if you don't, and this comes back to the narration in Muslim that we've talked about before, and like I said when I mentioned it, you know, it's something that's I'm going to keep repeating over and over again. You know, the story of Yazid al-Faqir. So if you remember, the hadith is in Sahih Muslim. So Yazid al-Faqir, Yazid at that time, you have to understand, was a common name. That Yazid ruined it for everybody after him. Okay, but Yazid at that time was not an uncommon name. It was a relatively common name. So Yazid al-Faqir, he had gotten influenced by the Khawarij. And so, and within the Khawarij, you had different aspects and different concepts and stuff. Just like you have within, you know, you have two people to get together and you have three different ideologies form. You know. So he comes, and so he and his friends, they get together, and they're going to go for Hajj. And the plan was, we're going to go for the Hajj, and after the Hajj, we're going to go around spreading this ideology. And so they did. So they made the Hajj, and after the Hajj, they ended up coming to Medina Munawwara. When they arrived in Medina Munawwara, they entered the Masjid of Rasulullah. And Jabir ibn Abdullah, who's a very close companion of Rasulullah, he is giving bayan, giving dars, giving lesson. He, you know, he's the one that we talked about, that he, you know, Rasulullah told him that you will meet, you know, his great-grandson, Imam Muhammad Baqir, and when you meet him, which is also in Sahih Muslim, when you meet him, give him my salam. So, and Jabir, you know, because of his old age, he had, you know, lost his physical sight. You know, the sight from the heart kept getting stronger and stronger, of course. So he's giving this lesson, and somehow in the lesson some topic came up about people being taken out of the fire and placed into Jannah in the hereafter. And so Yazid, you know, that's one thing about the Khawarij and those who, even modern day Khawarij who basically follow that same mindset. For some, and even, people who follow messed up ideologies, for some reason they're very bold. And people who claim to be following the correct idea, I don't want to create fitna. The guy who's talking this nonsense, he is the fitna. Why don't you want to say anything against him? So anyway, when Jabir, when he says this, or this topic comes up, Yazid immediately stands up.
Yeah,
Immediately says, stands up. And he says to Jabir, he says that you're saying this, that people will be taken out of the fire and placed in Jannah, and yet the Quran says this, and he recites 2 verses from the Quran. Verse number 192 of Surah Al-Imran, it says, رَبَّنَا إِنَّكَ مَن تُدْخِلَ النَّارَ فَقَدْ أَخْزَيْتَهُ وَمَا لِلظَّالِمِينَ مِنْ أَنصَارٍ. Our Lord, any whom thou dost admit to the fire, truly thou coverest with shame, meaning you have, disgraced him. Truly you have disgraced him, and never will the wrongdoers find any helpers. So he quotes this verse. And then he quotes the verse from, let's see, Surah Sajda ka kya number hai?
32.
32. Yeah, I think so. So that was Surah number 3, Surah Al-Imran, verse 192. But then he quotes the verse from Surah Sajda. Okay. Verse number 21. Well, no, not 21. Let's see. Okay. وَأَمَّا الَّذِينَ, verse number 20. وَأَمَّا الَّذِينَ فَسَقُوا فَمَأْوَاهُمُ النَّارُ كُلَّمَا أَرَادُوا أَن يُخْرِجُوا مِنْهَا أُعِيدُوا فِيهَا وَقِيلَ لَهُمْ ذُوقُوا عَذَابَ النَّارِ الَّذِي كُنْتُمْ بِهِ تُكَذِّبُونَ. As to those who are rebellious and wicked, their abode will be the fire. Every time they wish to get away therefrom, they will be forced thereinto, and it will be said to them, taste ye the chastisement of the fire which you were wont to reject, which you used to deny. So the denial here doesn't simply mean that they deny that the fire exists. It also, like certain people who say, oh, no, the fire is not for us, it's for everyone else. So they deny that they would be part of that punishment. So he quotes these 2 verses from the Quran to Jabir. The response of Jabir is not to quote some other verse of the Quran or some hadith or anything like that. He doesn't do any of that. He simply asked him a question. He said, have you read the Quran? So what we forget to think about here is he's asking this question to a person who's quoting the Quran to him. He says, have you read the Quran? And his implication is, you haven't really read the Quran. He says, have you read the Quran? He says, yes, of course I've read the Quran. I'm quoting you the Quran. I've read the Quran. So he says, well then, he says, if you read the Quran, then you would understand the azmat and the status of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And it is because of that status and that honor of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take people out of the fire and put them into paradise. which is proven through various other verses of the Quran and proven through various other, say, hadiths. Okay. He never quoted any of them. He simply said, if you had read the Quran, you would understand the azmat and the status of Rasulullah, which is also a lesson to us, that if we read the Quran and we have no concept of the azmat and the status of Rasulullah, we're not really reading the Quran. And this also gets back to the Khawarij, because Abdullah ibn Umar, he said about the Khawarij, he said they are the worst of people because they apply the verses revealed for the disbelievers upon the believers. When you look at the verses in the Quran, you have to see who is being spoken about. You know, does this apply to the disbelievers or does this apply to the believers? So because the modern day, many people, oh, see, the Quran says this. Well, yeah, but if you look at the context as to who's being, who it applies to, it doesn't apply to the believers. This applies to the disbelievers. How can you apply that to the believers? And this is why Abdullah ibn Umar said about them, these are the worst people. You know, because they use the Quran, you know, like a whip. You know, they want to whip somebody with it. And they use it, you know, totally in the wrong way. You know, and this is why, you know, you have to have, you know, because otherwise the nafs comes in, you know, and then shaitan, you know, the door's open for shaitan, and then, you know, you're just going all over the place. Yes. So this is why you know, all of this has to be done under somebody, you know, who can guide you through it. And that somebody who's guiding you through it should be somebody who's been guided through it himself. You know, because if he hasn't been guided through it, then what's he going to guide you?
Yeah, like you will find some so-called scholars now, they ask you to do bay'ah to them, but they haven't done bay'ah to anybody. They haven't given bay'ah to anybody.
Allegiance.
Yeah.
So, anyway. I'll end here today, inshallah. Yeah, we got 5 minutes, but I'll end here unless there's like a quick 1-minute question. Or if somebody wants to throw out a question that they'd like me to talk about next week or deal with something relative today or some other aspect of Ahlul Bayt, inshallah. Nothing to mind? Good. So, you know, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help us and guide us and protect us. Fill our hearts with that true love, because that love, as we talked about early on, you know, if we don't have that love, there is nothing else. There's no guidance without that love. And may give us all of this, inshallah. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa barakatuh.